cool. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about what's been going on in Egypt, but not the typical story of like covering covering every milestone, but talking about the most important things that happened during the last year or so, and what this means, and maybe draw some conclusions, and hopefully be able to draw some parallels with what's going on in Egypt. So with what's going on in Europe and Scandinavia. Let me warn you though, I talk a lot, so if you see that I'm talking too much, you need to stop me. If I'm talking too fast, which also happens, you need to let me know and interrupt me at any time. So yeah. Anyway. So I called it The Revolution's Inevitable. Bit of an optimistic thing to say, but the thing is, when you're going through a revolution, I think optimism and hope is sometimes the only thing you have to hang on to. Otherwise, you're kind of doomed. So I want to start by talking about Mahalla, 2008. Has anyone ever heard of the town Mahalla? Yeah? Mahalla is, if you can visualize Egypt, and you have the Nile, so you have Egypt, then you have the Nile, then you have the Delta. This would be a lot easier if I had the mic like this, right? Yeah, right in the middle of the Delta, right before you reach the Mediterranean, there's this big town called Mahalla. It's a city, right? And it's a very industrial city, and it specializes in factories in textile. And it's like the capital of the textile industry for the entire region, not only for Egypt. Actually, it's a very agricultural kind of land. However, when the British colonized Egypt, they decided to take this land and have some factories so they can make textiles and send it back to England or whatever, because they can, because that's what you do. So we're stuck with all these factories in the middle of very agricultural land, which is a very rare commodity in Egypt. But that's besides the point. What happened was, you have big factories, and you have some of the factories have tens of thousands of workers, especially the Mahalla textile factory. And this was in 2008, and it started in the 6th of April, 2008, when there was a huge strike, right, with 40,000 workers going on strike. And just so you know, it started with one of the departments, which was only women, and the women started the strike together, and they started chanting and saying, "We are the women, where are the men?" It was like a little big, you know, like, fuck you, if you excuse my French, for like, you know, saying, we are here and we're not going to take this crap anymore, and we're sick and tired of this. Workers in Mahalla have to work like 6 days a week, 12-hour shifts, get paid. In Swedish coronas, it would be the equivalent of like 400 coronas a month. Sometimes some get 250 and 300 coronas a month, and you rarely ever go up to 700, 800 coronas. And Egypt, even though it is a kind of a cheap country, it's still pretty expensive, and you can't afford to raise a family with that sort of money. And the thing is, inflation in Egypt is so bad that this money is being devalued by the year, but your salary isn't going up. And that was one of the big problems you had there. So, huge strike. And what did they do? This was in 2008, mind you, right? Like the revolution and everything is 2011. This is 3 years before. They took down Mubarak's photo from like one of the big signs. You know, we had Mubarak's photos all over, like you do. And so they took it down, and they kept stepping on it, and they kept chanting against Mubarak. And this was the first time we see the image of this brutal dictator being taken to the ground and people stepping on it with their shoes. It was absolutely inspirational. It was amazing. Like, it was just incredible. How could he do this? This is like more of a king. This guy has been ruling at that point for 27 years, 26 or 27 years. And he's ruling with an iron fist, and if he didn't like you, he'd send you to political prisons and with no charge. And we had it was pretty much a military dictatorship. You had no rights to strike. Even any sort of assembly was illegal. And this is what they did. And I truly believe, and there are a lot of people who agree with me, that this was the real start of the revolution. The working class, the workers, the people who are really suffering from their poor conditions and the exploitation, taken to the streets and having the level of awareness to be able to link that with the ruling dictator. To be able to say, Mubarak is responsible for the fact that we cannot make it to the end of the month and that we are starving to death. He's the one responsible. That within itself was a huge milestone. So working class, 40,000 striking. Okay. This is January 25th, 2011. It's a pretty low resolution image, but I think you can get a good idea of Tahrir Square, obviously the very famous Disney kind of tahrir. Well, what you have here is the 25th of January 2011, and you hear this all the time on Egyptian TV, all the different political groups keep telling you, oh yeah, I was there from day one, from the 25th of January, I was there, and we were all there up until Mubarak left, and we were hardcore revolutionaries from the beginning, which is bullshit, because in Tahrir, there was probably around 40 to 50,000 people throughout the day. Now that is a very small number relatively. By then it was huge, like we did not expect that many people. I went there, I had been going to protests and being active and stuff. I wasn't the most politically active, but you know, politically inclined to take part in a few demonstrations, you know, get beat up every once in a while, and then it's kind of very difficult to keep your head up high and to keep going, right? So I went with my friend on that day, and I was thinking, you know, it's going to be another one of those demonstrations where we got like 300 people and you know, and like 2,000 policemen. And on the way to Tahrir, we were thousands, and I was like, wow, this is incredible. And I was already on Twitter, and I was taking all sorts of photos and uploading them. And this got a lot of people that are following me and that know me and my friends and family and stuff to actually join and to take part, because they realize this is huge, right? So basically, if you've seen images from Tahrir, you'd see like the images from high above where you can't see the ground because it's completely packed with people. Tahrir is pretty empty here. I mean, you have this part here, but then the actual square, it's just got some people as it normally would. This is downtown Cairo, remember? So it's normal for there to be people hanging around. And then this whole area is kind of empty, but it's kind of closed off because cars didn't want to come in because they heard there are people causing commotion in Tahrir, right? So right here, this is the bridge, Asr Nil Bridge, very famous bridge. If you've seen images from the revolution and you've seen the battle that went on for hours and the police spraying water on those praying and what have you, that was the bridge that goes that way. So people who are standing there, they're living their lives completely normally. This is everyday Egypt, Cairo, nothing different. And then you walk here, and it's like, wow, this is a revolution getting started, right? So very few people went, and I can tell you and I can assure you, I recognize the overwhelming majority of the people at the square. The thing is, Egypt is a very classist society, as many developing countries are. And what we have is, I'm part of like the upper middle class, or more likely the upper class, but not because I'm rich, but because everyone else is poor, right? If I were living in Malmö, right, I'd be considered, you know, lower middle class or middle class. But in Egypt, you know, the fact that my family, okay, we all have one car, that's like a big deal. It's like, wow, you guys have a car. That's like, we're like in the top 5% in Egypt, or top 10%, just because we own a car, right? So, people I saw here were a lot of intellectuals, a lot of progressive political activists, a lot of people who might not have been suffering from the regime. In fact, because they were upper middle class and upper class, they were benefiting from the fact that they didn't get into trouble because they had the right connections, because they got away with a lot of corruption. And so we kind of benefited from the system. Can you guys hear me fine? Is everything okay? Okay, I feel like I'm not holding this at the right distance. Okay, cool. So, so basically, right here, this is a completely different crowd to what we had in Mahalla. We're not talking about factory workers, we're not talking about the working class. We're talking about avant-garde, progressive, intellectual Egyptians, people who have done a lot of reading, who've had contact with the outside world, who've probably done a bit of traveling, who've seen things going on, and they have a bit of vision, and they're like, let's do something. This is going to be huge. Of course, you had people. Funny story, actually. On the way there, I was with my sister, right? And we were going to go there. She went there earlier, or whatever. My sister makes me seem like a very lame activist wannabe because she's so hardcore, right? So in the morning, we were walking out, and we stopped to get a sandwich from that guy who sells like sandwiches in the streets. This guy probably makes like 200 coronas a month. Like that's the profit he makes out of selling these sandwiches in a makeshift kind of bicycle that's turned into like a sandwich shop for a few hours, right? So again, and then we say, yo, we're going to Tahrir today. It's gonna be huge. And so I was like, really? What's going on? I'm like, dude, like these are demonstrations. You're gonna come? He's like, nah. I'm like, why? Do you like Mubarak? He's like, no, I don't like him, but what am I going to do? You know, you got the typical kind of apolitical, apathetic kind of answer that you get from a lot of people in Egypt. You know, Mubarak was very successful over the years. This started with Abdel Nasser, actually, and then Sadat, but Mubarak perfected the idea of pushing people away from politics, right? So I get my sandwiches, and it's fine, and we go there, and then we keep running back and forth with the police, and they're shooting tear gas at us, and we're getting hurt, and we're kind of, it's really tough conditions. At one point, we're running away from the police, and then we see the sandwich guy's like, "Hey guys, I came." Like, holy shit, you know, it's that's crazy. What are you doing here? He's like, "No, I just came. I thought, check it out." And that was awesome. But I can tell you that the majority of the people here were not sandwich makers. They were upper middle class and upper class Egyptians, and this is a completely different crowd to Mahalla. Then what do we have? January 28th, 2011. Have people heard of this day? Are there any Egyptians here, by the way? No Egyptians? Okay. Anyone been to Egypt during the revolution? Show of my hands. People have been to since the revolution have been to Egypt? Not many? Okay, so you might have not heard much about this day, but this day was huge. January 28th, 2011, this was 3 days after that protest that we saw, and this was called the Friday of Anger, right? And this is the chance for everyone just to go out and say that they're angry, right? So what the government did was, instead of trying to maintain it, they freaked out and they didn't know what to do. So what they did is they cut off communication completely. So you didn't have SMSs, you didn't have phone calls, the mobile service was completely shut off, internet was completely shut off, we're all completely disconnected, there's no way to get in touch. But the thing is, January 25th at like 2 p.m., Egypt was perfectly normal. And then by later that evening, when we saw this big protest going on, and we were starting to be part of something big, those people in Tahrir and people who know them started thinking, wow, Friday could be huge, right? And then when they cut off communication completely, like a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, right? At that time, he said, I was at his place on January 27th, and we're chilling at his apartment. I said, I was all nervous, right? Like, tomorrow, we're gonna get together, internet's slowing down, I think they're gonna cut it off. They've never done this before, by the way. And we're gonna march to Tahrir, I don't know what it's gonna be like. And he's like, no, I'm not gonna go. Like, why aren't you gonna go? He said, I don't have an alternative to offer. If I go and I say, I hate Mubarak, but if I say I don't want Mubarak, I need to offer an alternative. If I don't like this regime, I need to offer a different alternative to that regime, right? So I said, okay, well, that's retarded, but you do whatever you want, right? Turns out, my friend, we call him Boogie. So Boogie, what happened with him is, he was sitting that early afternoon or whatever, pulled up his laptop, and was about to go online, but he found the internet's not working. So he pulled up his cell phone, trying to make calls, and he can't make any calls either. He got so pissed off because he felt the authorities walked into his house and kind of blocked off his personal space, right? So he got so pissed off that he came and he was really active on January 28th, right? And I think he's not the one. I think there are a lot of people who've done pretty much the same thing. The authorities, when they're desperate, they take drastic measures and they take big risks. And sometimes it works, but other times it's a complete failure for them. So what happened here is people went out in all of Egypt. No one knew what was going on. It was completely dark because you could only see the people around you. But you don't know else what's going on. Like in some places, you get to residential buildings and you see some mothers standing in balconies and you say, dude, what's going on? They say, Suez is on fire. Alexandria, there are millions in Alexandria protesting. And you kind of get the news from neighbors standing outside of the balconies, right? So that day, a total of 99 police stations were burnt to the ground. Can we get a round of applause to that, please? 99. We burnt 99 police stations. That was a big fuck you to the police to say, we do not take this, we do not accept this, we do not like this. We are being humiliated, we are being treated like shit, and we deserve better, right? And this is all Egyptians, especially lower class and lower middle class, like with a kind of a lower socioeconomic background, suffered a lot more, but no one liked the police, and everyone felt like they were being constantly harassed and hassled by the police, right? So So we burnt down, and then here in this building, I wasn't part of, unfortunately, I didn't get to burn a police station myself. However, I did join in burning this building right here in the back, which is the National Democratic Building, right? The National Democratic Party, the NDP. This is Mubarak's party. They had a huge building, that was their headquarters, and they had a big sign, and the elections were coming up, and they had a big sign saying, you know, this is for you. You know, like one of those signs, the propaganda signs, like, we are here for you. And we like the people attacked the building first, took out everything that was inside, looted it, and then burnt it to the ground. It was absolutely glorious. And the flames went on for a couple of days after that, and there were pictures with that sign, that big sign in front of it, saying, you know, we're doing this for you, and the building in flames behind it. It was beautiful. But that's the idea. We're not making any money out of burning stations and burning police stations, burning this. You are sending a message, and this message is what the Spaniards put it very, very nicely. I have Spain very close to my heart, as many Spaniards know, but they put it very, very nicely in the term. They say indignados. Indignados means I am offended. I object. I don't like this shit. I don't accept this. I don't want this to happen to me. I deserve better, and I could live better. Why am I putting up with this? And this is such a beautiful term, and it's so expressive because you saw it on January 28th. All sorts of Egyptians, lower class, lower middle class, all sorts of different socioeconomic backgrounds, were all taking part in these protests, and they were all expressing how indignados they felt. And this was great. Actually, halfway through, we were it was like around 8 p.m. or whatever. I was with my friend. We kind of had to hold on to each other because if you lose someone, you never see him again. We walked over to a place nearby and went to a kiosk. We have all these kiosks, right, where you can make calls because they have landlines. So I call my mom, right? I call her and I say, hey, and she's freaking out. I'm like, what's going on? She said, she was in constant contact with every single mother of every single person that I've met in my entire life, right? And she said, your friend Ali is back, I don't know what. Your other friend is I don't know where. She had the status update on every single person. She's like, you and your sister are the only people who are not back yet. What the hell are you doing? So I told her, it's okay, it's calm. We burnt down the NDP building. We're about to burn the Parliament building, and then we'll head straight back home, and I'll be fine. I'll be tucked in bed, I'll be good to go. Unfortunately, we did not get to burn down the Parliament, but the one big thing we really, really regretted not burning down was the TV and radio building. This is the propaganda machine that the military and the regime have been using, and it's been very effective, and it's been really hindering our efforts. So, and this goes to show that communication is everything. If you have the keys to communication, I think you can really mobilize. So what happened? If you guys have been following the news, following what's going on in Egypt and stuff, you'd be familiar with SCAF. SCAF is the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, the head of the military, and after Mubarak stepped down, he transferred power to SCAF, which is kind of funny if you think about it. Imagine you're working in a company, and then you get fired, right? You're like the president of the company, you get fired, and then people say you are not good enough, and we hate you, and you need to go. And they say, okay, before I go, I'm going to delegate my responsibilities to this guy, you know? Who the hell are you? You're being fired. You are being removed as the president of Egypt. Who are you to say the army is responsible? But we were so excited about the fact that we kicked out Mubarak that he could have had Israel, you know, take control. We didn't care, like fine, you know? We got rid of Mubarak, that's what matters. I'm kidding, obviously we'd want Israel. So SCAF go in. So this is the military junta. This is the guys who have been in control since the military coup in 1952, which was led by, amongst other people, Gamal Abdel Nasser, who became the first dictator, you know, a fascist, Stalinist kind of guy who was in Egypt for 16 years. And then we had Sadat, who was another dictator, but he was a capitalist bastard dictator. And then Mubarak was just a lame fucking dictator. Like, he wasn't even anything anywhere near. But actually, Mubarak was implementing some very strong neoliberal policies that was enforced on us by the United States and fully supported by the West, of course, which forced us to privatize a lot of things, to lose, and our economy looked like it was growing. but the people were getting a lot poorer. And that's probably one of the main reasons why people ended up revolting. So the military comes in, and what do? They have the tactic that happens everywhere in the world, right? They come and they hail the Great Revolution. They say, this was an awesome revolution. This has been an amazing experience and an amazing milestone in Egyptian history. We are very proud to be part of this, and we stand with the people against corruption and against harm. Mubarak was their buddy. Like they slept together. Like this is not. They trying to pretend like there's something different, but the military has always been an extremely powerful establishment in Egypt, and they've always been in control. So they try to hail the revolution, right? And then what do? They cut a deal. This is a very interesting thing, and I think this would probably happen anywhere where there's any sort of social change. What you need to do is you need to divide the people that you're conquering, right? So you need to be able to see the biggest faction and approach them and try to make them a lucrative deal. And you probably don't need to make a deal to all of the people who are part of this faction, but only the leaders, which means you're paying just a little bit of money and you get to keep status quo and you kill the revolutionary movement. And that's what they did. What they did is that they partnered up with the Islamist parties. So we have the main party, which I'm sure you've all heard of, is the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood, it's a very profound and complex movement in the West. They always kind of oversimplify and take a very Orientalist approach and convey them as a bunch of beards who haven't had sex in years. They might have not had sex in years, I might agree with that, but however, they are not just a bunch of beards. And they are much more on the ground, and they have a lot more, there's a lot more to them. I hate them, but not because they're Islamists, but precisely because they did this. What they tried to do is, because they had so much support, they agreed with SCAF to kill the revolutionary movement, right? By saying, this revolution is over, we need to collaborate with the army, we need to build the new Egypt. This is the buzzword here, build the new Egypt. As if to assume that the regime has been formed. Oh, okay. Sure. Thanks. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay, good. I'd like to thank also Adam, who's been working really, really hard ever since this morning. Got up really, really early, and actually left early last night. We were together to make this happen. So thank you very much, Adam. So cutting a deal, that puts us in a very tough situation, because instead of being one united team against a dictator, we now have a divided team against the regime, and it's just so hard to pinpoint. And I'm sure my American and Spanish counterparts could tell you how difficult it is to not have a precise, easy to target enemy. So that's the other thing. And then the propaganda machine. That's the building we didn't burn down. The military on January 28th, they got to Cairo, right? That's the cool thing, because we were in Cairo and we were fighting the police, whatever. Then the police backed out because they couldn't handle us. That's how devastating we were to them. And then when that happened, the army sent in tanks. So you were in downtown Cairo and you would see tanks coming in. It was absolutely brilliant. It was so much fun and it was so amazing. This is the start of something new. But the thing is, the first tanks came to Cairo, went straight to the radio and TV building, fenced it off, put barbed wire, put a whole bunch of troops, and then the rest of the tanks came and took over the rest of Cairo, and then we had the 18 days and the camping and the Mubarak stepping down and everything. But the first thing they protected was a propaganda machine. They knew it was the most important. They're just ahead of us, you know? They know they're on top of things. But it would have been difficult to burn it down, but we could have at least tried. I mean, we burnt down a building that was only a couple of buildings away from it. So that's SCAF. Now what do you have after that? You have the Islamists, right? This is kind of the image you guys get of Islamists, right? Like angry, grumpy, older men who haven't had sex in a long time. But no, that's not what they are. The Islamists it's a very diverse kind of branch of Egyptian politics. We have the Muslim Brotherhood, and then we have the Salafis. Now the Salafis, if you haven't heard of them, you're going to be hearing them very soon. By the looks of the Dutch and the Belgian and the Scandinavian governments all going to the far left and walking right into fascism. you're going to be hearing about these sort of enemies, and so they're going to be this is going to be a very easy target because these are men with beards who speak loudly. So it's like the really, really good target for fascists. So basically, they have the Salafis are sometimes classified as ultra-Orthodox. I don't like this term. I'd like to put it as these are people who are very religious and who believe that if religion is applied the right way, and there's a couple lines under right, then everyone would be happy. There would be social justice, there would be freedom, the right freedom that you're supposed to have, and they really thought that this would be the best for everyone. So, but the problem with the Salafis as a kind of religious group is they really got into politics, and they came in as a kind of the ultra-religious arm of the Muslim Brotherhood. So there was an alliance there with the Muslim Brotherhood, who are much more, they are religious, but religion isn't that important to them in comparison to with the Salafis. The Muslim Brotherhood are neoliberals at the end of the day. In fact, the US is fine with the Muslim Brotherhood because the Muslim Brotherhood have assured that they are going to be applying the same neoliberal policies that Mubarak has been applying, which means they'll still be privatizing everything, and they'll still make sure that it's an attractive country for foreign businesses to come to invest, that our resources go at very cheap prices, and that we're part of the World Trade Organization, and we'll take the loans from IMF and World Bank, etc. So the problem with them, though, is if you talk about the Islamists as in general, with all the diversity inside it, they kind of, their leaders, their political leaders struck a deal with SCAF, but then the followers aren't always going to be blindly following. They're probably going to be more loyal than your average political party. You can see them as a bit of a cult, if you will. However, after a while, you start realizing, this is shit. I mean, why are our leaders being so lenient with the military, who is obviously doing all sorts of human rights violations, or is obviously not protecting the revolution as they claim to be? And that's when you start having things break up, and that's what I see happening at this phase in the revolution. So, Islamists. Then what do we have? July 8th sit-in. This was a big downer for us. Like, this is the moment where if you don't have, like, insane amounts of optimism and hope, you just probably commit suicide. The July 8th sit-in was started when people said, we need another revolution. This Jan 25 crap is not working. The army is totally in control. They are imprisoning over 10,000 Egyptians with no charges whatsoever. They are cutting deals with the Islamists, and they're basically still buddies with the U.S. and Israel, and we don't have any sort of independence, and they haven't fixed any of our problems. And we still have the same mayors, we still have the same local councils, we still have the same leaders in all the authority buildings and the governments. We have this. Nothing has changed. But we took the streets. We were completely divided because the Islamists had spoke against the sit-in, and they said, we do not have anything to do with this. They're completely hypocritical. Like, we were all together during the 18 days, and then they were saying, you know what, this has nothing to do with us, we're against this, and then they start using religion. It's really difficult to argue with religion, right? You could imagine, like when someone says, well, God says it. This guy probably knows his shit, so you do what he does, but that's not cool. So people turned against Jan 25. People were like, we're sick and tired of these demonstrations. The army was very successful at sending the message that all the problems are because of those thugs in Tahrir. All of the economy is not improving because people are protesting instead of working. The best thing to do to save the revolution is to work, and work really hard to build a new Egypt. And people fall for this shit. You think, like, guys, are you serious? And they really believe it. And they say, yeah, now's not the time to demonstrate. We need to calm down, we need to settle, and we need to build a new Egypt. It's ridiculous. So anyway, the July 8th had a whole bunch of like intellectuals and like the same 40,000 kind of that were in Tahrir the first day. We're back again, but we were having sit-ins after we were used to seeing over 1 million people in the area. Now we had very few, and it was a failure, and people were turning really hard against the revolution. But then, that's the thing, this is the beauty. This is the beauty of power to the people. This is the beauty of trying to use an authoritarian, a totalitarian regime to crush the people, is that we're so many. Like, how can you crush all of these people? It's impossible. We had waves of labor strikes throughout the entire republic that were incredible. These are the workers of the Transport Authority. The Transport Authority, same deal, they get anywhere between 250 to 500 coronas a month, treated like shit, they have horrible hours, they work non-stop, they were promised raises but they don't get them, they don't have contracts, they don't have proper contracts so they could get their pensions and get social services, they don't have any of that. So basically, they went on strikes. Before Jan 25, 2011, we had 2 independent labor unions in Egypt. Now, we have over 250. The labor movement is absolutely incredible. It's growing at insane speeds, and the people are, this is what I would say, indignados. They might go and say, you know, the hell with Tahrir. They're a bunch of thugs who are paid by Israel, Hezbollah, Hamas, United States, and Iran. We know that because the army told us that, and we believe them. But fuck that. I'm getting 300 coronas a month and I can't live, and we are not going to take this shit. And the authority, they're corrupt. Our leaders get hundreds of thousands of coronas a month, and that is not fair. We need to get a proper salary. We need to get a raise. We need to have contracts. We need to have minimum wage. And this was the message that was everywhere. And it's fine. They could be against the revolution because they are being very much revolutionaries, but they might not be aware of it. Some of them were, like the ones in Mahalla in 2008 were aware of it. I mean, if you are striking because your working conditions are horrible, what does the president of the country have to do with it? But you have the awareness levels to make that linkage and to realize that it was this guy who is giving us this horrible system, which is producing our leaders and our presidents of these factories, and that's why we're getting paid shit, and that's why we're not getting anywhere. So this September and October of last year was there was the biggest wave of strikes in modern Egypt. It was incredible, and it was awesome. And then we had the Tuesday of Muhammad Mahmoud. Now this is Tahrir. Remember the first photo I showed you, Jan 25? Now this is Tahrir when it's full. But this is not during the 18 days. People always talk about the million-man march of the millionayas, they call it. The millionaire of the Tahrir days, where every Tuesday and every Friday we'd have over 1 million people packed in there. But this was November 22nd. This was 8 or 9 months after the revolution was over. This is incredible. And you know what? The Islamists had spoken against this. And they said, we are not taking part in this. And by Islamists, I mean the parties, Muslim Brotherhood and the Salafi parties. They said, we have nothing to do with this, and we do not want to be part of this, and we are against this, and no one should go out. And look at what we did. Now this was a big fuck you to anyone who betrays the revolution. Anyone who goes against the people and tries to strike a deal to take a shortcut so that they can get out of it and get a better deal, and then we're all left in the shit, this is what happens to them. We keep going and we don't care about them. We had the July 8th sit-in, it was a complete failure. It had some gains, by the way, but overall it was a failure. But this just shows, you know what? We have enough revolutionaries in Egypt. We do not need every single person to support the revolution. And the Islamists were like, oh shit. The only advantage we had for the military to deal with us is because we had support. And this is showing that we actually don't have that much support. Then we have the parliamentary elections. This is kind of upper middle class neighborhood. And these are people packed, women, because they kind of, with schools, because they had so many voters, they separated it, women on one side, men on the other. So you can see the men side are here, and then the women are all here. And as you can see, it's a huge queue to go in and vote. Elections, what an amazing, what a fascinating invention by the bourgeois democracy to make elections to shoot down any revolutionary movement. It's so sad, but it's interesting. From day one, I'm a revolutionary socialist, by the way, in Egypt. The revolutionary socialists were a Marxist, Trotskyist kind of movement. And so, what happened was, I was boycotting the elections, and the revolutionary socialists were all boycotting. There was some people calling for a boycott, but a lot of people did not buy it, and they actually stood in line to vote. It's crazy. Like, whenever you have activism on the ground, as an authoritarian regime, as a corrupt regime, what you do is you say, you know what? Ballot boxes, That's political activism. You want to say you're indignado? Go to the ballot box, write indignado, and put it in that box, and Egypt is going to become a better country. And obviously, it's absolute bullshit. That's not how it works, because the regime is exactly as it was. In fact, the parliament, the majority of the members of our parliament are the same members of parliament we had before. The overwhelming majority are Islamists who have been defending the army, have been defending the ministers, have been attacking the thugs in Tahrir. I've been called the thugs so many times. It's incredible. And basically, these people bought it. These are people who look like, you know, upper middle class, upper class, have had a chance to get a good education, what have you. But there's this wave of Islamophobia going through the country where people are so scared of beards, and I'm sure like in Scandinavia, you know what I mean. People are so scared of beards that they're like, oh no, I'm gonna go vote for the liberal guy. Because the liberal guy is not going to tell me I can't put on a bikini and drink alcohol. And then the same thing goes the opposite direction of people who are so scared of personal freedom that they say, holy shit, I'm going to go vote for the Islamist. Because he is going to apply God's rule. And you know what? God, he knows how to rule. Like this is the guy, this is the go-to guy when it comes to ruling. So people fell for it. In this case, all these people, all they did was give legitimacy. This is my opinion, obviously. Everything I said is my opinion. So you don't go and tell people, you know what, beards in Egypt, and like, kind of think things through before just saying what I said. The women, a lot of these upper class and upper middle class women, what they were doing is they were giving legitimacy to the parliament. At the end of the day, the military knew that the parliament would fully support it, because they knew that you obviously know who has the best chances of winning, and you're the one counting the votes, and you're the one monitoring the elections, and you have the same judges who were the judges during the elections of Mubarak's times, which were a fucking joke, and you have the same system that we had during Mubarak's times. So basically nothing has changed, and so what they're doing is they're saying these Islamists, these pro-military Islamists who are in the parliament, are legitimate. And when we went down on the 28th of January to burn 99 police stations and burn the NDP building and burn buildings of some of the very rich businessmen who have been really exploiting their workers and have been very corrupt and have had monopolies and what have you, when we burned down these places, we weren't getting anything back. We were sending a message and we were saying, we, the people, do not give you legitimacy to do what you're doing. And that's what matters. They completely threw what we did out the window. So, but you know, you have to gain awareness. You have to go through phases. Just like the workers can't really link the revolution to their strikes, these people cannot really link the revolution to what it really is, the revolution. And then, but basically after what happened with the elections is that the strikes kind of went down, so we didn't have that many strikes. And then we had problems, all sorts of stuff, like there were, what else was I going to say? Besides the strikes, demonstrations were a lot less because people had high hopes for the parliament. And they said, now we have a revolutionary parliament. The youngest member of parliament is like 60. Okay, there were members of parliament who would go out yelling, right, like with beards this big, yelling that there are thugs in Tahrir and we need to protect the Minister of Interior from these thugs, right? Incredible. So this revolutionary parliament was supposed to defend and bring our rights back. This is January 25th, 2012. This is everyone, okay, even the Islamists, but there were some clashes there, but that's a different story. But this is all saying, we're still here. This is not cool. We're not happy. Things haven't changed, and we want things to change, and we're not going to let things be the way they are. And this shot down what the propaganda machine was telling us. The propaganda machine was working in one end, telling everyone that we are agents working for Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, and telling everyone that we are thugs who are looking out to destroy Egypt. And they're also telling everyone that there are thugs all over and that they need to apply strict, brutal emergency law to kind of defend, to kind of protect the Egyptians and bring back security and stability. Stability, that's a key word, stability. You guys use that a lot in, I think, who was telling me, I think Mårdhed was telling me about stability being the key word, right? Yeah. It's amazing. It does wonders, stability. Like, I tried this once and be like, guys, let's go to Tahrir for stability, but it didn't win. So this is the anniversary, and we are there, and we're still going to be there, and this is huge. Now, then what happened? The presidential elections came up, right? You'd think we learned something for the parliamentary elections, but no, we keep going with the presidential elections, and guess what? This guy, Omar Slimane, was the vice president of Mubarak, who was hired a week before Mubarak stepped down, and he was the former head of military intelligence. This is the Gestapo guy of Egypt, right? Running for presidency. This guy was the Minister of Foreign Affairs for 10 years under the Mubarak regime, and then for 12 years he was head of the Arab League. And we all know what an amazing job the Arab League did to protect Iraq, Palestine, and to be against all of the brutal dictatorships and monarchies across the Arab world. This guy right here, running for presidency. This guy, right? This is Amr Moussa, by the way. You probably hear the name. You'll hear it a lot because I think he's the one who's going to win. Ahmad Shafiq, right? Ahmad Shafiq was Prime Minister when Mubarak stepped down. He's in the Air Force in the military. So these are two from the military, and this is a guy who's a loyal dog to Mubarak. All three running for presidency, and the guy in the middle looks like he's going to win it. And this is ridiculous, and people are falling for this shit. People are like, yeah, holy shit, we need to take part to make sure that the remnants of the old regime don't win. But why would SCAF, being in control of the country, let someone that they don't approve of win? They're monitoring the elections, they're counting the votes, they're doing everything. They could be completely transparent. All they need to do is throw in the right combination of candidates. You throw in 3 Islamists, gone. All the Islamist vote has been divided. You throw in these people, you scare everyone into a military dictatorship. And so they say, let's go for this guy. This guy's much better than those two. And let's go for this guy. He's much better than the people, the hardcore Islamists who are going to tell us we can't wear bikinis and drink alcohol. You know what I mean? It's become such a it's become one of those like American kind of soap opera kind of thing where it's like there's so much junk going on that has nothing to do with the real revolution. And we're taking part. And that's why it's been slowing down. Strikes have still been going because the workers who were kind of took it easy on strikes during the parliamentary elections have become a lot more aware than they were at that point. And that's why they're not stopping. They're like, okay, presidential elections, whatever. I still want my 800 coronas. And our demands are, we're not even demanding something decent. We're demanding to be barely starving to death. That's the demands of the workers. And we're still not there yet. So everyone's all involved in the presidential elections. If you're following it, it's a lot of fun. New breaking news every hour. Things are different. But let me just tell you, and you heard this here first, and when this happens, you'll be like, yo, this is Egyptian guy with like a half-ass fro who came to Malmö, and he told me Amr Moussa was going to be president. Oh man, he was right. So I want to end this with a couple of slides, 2 slides, this one and the next slide. I just want to draw some conclusions here. These are my conclusions, and they could be wrong, and they probably are, but this is what I think they're right. The first one, revolutions are spontaneous. You can't plan them. This drives people crazy. This drove the Egyptian authority crazy. Who was planning this? They would take the April 6th movement, which is a bunch of Facebook people who are activists and are trying to do this sort of thing, and they threw them all in prison, and they were imprisoning them, they were torturing them, treating them like shit, because they need to have someone responsible for this revolution. Who planned this? But that's not the case. I mean, it's just people were indignados. We were pissed off. We've had enough. We've been treated like shit, and we know we deserve better. We've seen people being treated better. We've seen Tunisia get rid of their dictator. Why can't we do it? If Tunisia can do it, then we can. And there's so many things that helped us believe. And that's why I'm saying revolutions are spontaneous. Don't try, like if you try to plan a revolution, and if you try to guess one too, like good luck, but it's a guessing game. Leaders movements are grassroots. They always gave us shit when we were in Tahrir. During the 18 days, I was camped out. Actually, I set up a camp with a friend of mine, a tent, the next day after Friday of Anger, and I was we were pretty much the first tent there, and the tents started popping up around us and stuff. And I was there, and people would always say, "Okay, you guys need to elect a leader, and this leader will talk to the authorities, and he will make sure that our demands are met." Like, Why the fuck do we need a leader? This whole point, the whole point of this is that we're sick and tired of Mubarak, and we're sick and tired of this whole authoritarian dictatorship. We don't want a leader. We're all leaders. Yeah, we're all leaders. You know, and I got sick and tired of this question. And the whole point of having a leader for the authority is to have someone negotiate with. Because once you have a leader, you can make this leader an offer. Once this leader has this offer, you can divide the movement. Once the movement is divided, this is dead. And that's what they wanted. And that's what drove them crazy, because they couldn't get anyone. They kept arresting people. They kept talking to people. They couldn't do anything. One time I went to a meeting. I went from Tahrir, went to meet a bunch of, I shit you not, old wise men. They were like a group of old men who were intellectuals, who were businessmen, who were former ambassadors, and some of them were ministers before, and they know how to deal with authorities. And they said they're all 70 and over. And they said, and they're all 70 and over men, like not a single woman. And they're like, okay, guys, you are some of the youth who are doing this, and this is amazing. We want you to tell us what your demands are, and we're going to go and we're going to talk with Mubarak and see if he can meet these demands. Like, our demands for Mubarak is for Mubarak to get the hell out of there. So I don't know why you're going to go talk to him, and I don't know what you're going to be able to do with that, but that's that in mind. So this idea of having old, grumpy men who have not gone late in a long time, I can assure you, right? Lead the young, dynamic, energetic crowd who are bringing down the regime. It's retarded. 3, reform buys time for dying regimes. This is epic. They do this all the time. In Egypt, what happened was Mubarak saw the people like, oh shit, okay, I'm getting rid of all the ministers and I'm getting new ministers. And they're like, well, I'm not going anywhere. Like, okay, I'm going to step down after 6 months, and I'm not going to leave this Egypt because I love this country, and I'm going to die a patriotic Egyptian on Egyptian soil. He said that in his speech, and all of us in Tahrir took our shoes off and pointed it to the screen, okay, as a message to say, you know, fuck you, right? So we did that. I got calls from people saying, Tarek, okay, you heard this, you saw the speech, right? I'm like, yeah, I saw the speech. Like, okay, he's stepping down after 6 months, and we're going to have free and fair elections. Let's go home. Let's go back to stability. Where the country's in tatters, we're shattered, we're having problems, and it's insecure, and it's unstable, and the country and the police are nowhere to be seen, and we're having thugs all over the country. I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. We are holding Tahrir and Suez and Alexandria and all sorts of cities. We are all united against this guy. Why would we ever give that up? His speech was very effective, but it wasn't effective enough. And the thing is, you try to make some improvements, but when governments do that, the whole idea of reform is to protect the regime and make it last longer. If a regime is dying or if it's suffering, they give you some freedom. We have a term in Arabic, okay, that means letting out some air. And this is when there's like a balloon that's about to explode. So instead of letting it explode, you kind of let it seep out some air, and you let that balloon last longer. That's exactly what they want to do. They want the regime to keep going. And so they make some improvements. And people think these improvements are good and say, okay, we have that. All right, now let's build on that, and then we can get the next step and the next step. But the whole idea of reform is to avoid change. You cannot reach change with reform. It is impossible. And that's why they say, oh, you know, they say this in Europe all the time. Oh, you know, things are bad. Next elections. Next elections, we're going to get the right members of parliament, and they are going to straighten this shit up. It's bullshit. It's not going to happen. Because the system and the regime is like that. It's not going to change. If you want it to change, you need to bring down the system. And bringing down the system doesn't mean electing different members of parliament. It means bringing it down, literally. And then don't market the revolution, but rather convince people they deserve better. We do this all the time when people say, people aren't in Tahrir. We need to tell them this revolution is good for everyone and that everyone will be happy with the revolution. I say, that's very difficult. It's a lot easier to tell people, how much you make a month? 600 coronas? Why the hell are you making 600? How many kids do you have? 2 kids? And the third on the way? And you're making 600 coronas? How are you going to survive on 600 coronas? Why the hell? Do you know that there are people here that have tens of houses with swimming pools and cars and deals, and they have Swiss bank accounts, and you're making 600 kronas a month. Why aren't you making 1,500 kronas a month with a contract, with benefits, with working hours? Why aren't you treated with respect? Why are you not being treated the way you're supposed to be treated? And make it very personal. And I think that works a lot better. And I think obviously strikes are the way to do it. So I want to end this with this slide. Am I doing okay on time? I went kind of over, half hour over, right? Sorry.
Continue.
Okay, good. I'm just going to end with this slide. This is a theory, and Tatiana here was helping me put this together. I'm talking about the awareness levels, right? That's what I feel that people go through, whether in Egypt or anywhere in the world. First, you have the idea that c'est la vie, this is the way life is. I'm poor, other people are rich, that's life. I'm not going to complain, I have to accept it. This is like institutionalized religions specialize in this, right? And I'm not talking about Islam, I'm talking about Islam, Christianity, Judaism, whatever systemized religion, institutionalized, always tries to convince you that your life is shit because the afterlife, it's going to be happening, and it's going to be women all over. There's going to be all sorts of drinks. There's going to be greenery. What do you like? Amusement parks? You're going to have amusement parks all day long. It's not true. That's not how it is. Whether you want to believe or not, that's fine. That's a personal thing. But I'm not going to let people tell other people or tell me that we have to put up with a shitty life because the afterlife is going to be great. We have to accept that some people get to have all sorts of money and wealth and health and education, everything, while we're barely, well, not me because I'm personally not suffering that, but the majority of people are barely making it through the end of the month, don't have any access to proper health care, don't have any proper education, don't have any chances in life, and they just end up cleaning floors and collecting garbage, and they make 300 to 400 kronas a month, and they don't have any contract, and they don't have any sort of treatment. That's not cool. And this goes with a lot of people until the shit really hits the fan. And the neoliberal policies that Mubarak was shoving down our throats because America told him to, that led us to people to move from this and be like, you know what, life's shit. They just complain and be like, I'm poor, this guy's rich, that's horrible, I hate my life, I hate the way I'm being treated, this is not cool, but you don't do anything about it. You just feel that you're going to complain. You're just complaining. And it's cool to complain. At least you recognize that there's a problem. Here you're recognizing that things aren't going so dandy, right? Over here you're thinking, no, that's how it is, it's normal. The caste system, like you look at the caste system in India, and the feudal system and everything, and this kind of makes a lot of sense. But here, it's like, no, none of this feudal shit. This is shit, but this is how it goes. Here, right, and credit to my Spanish counterparts for this term, here you feel, I'm not going to take this shit anymore. I deserve better. I don't like this. I'm indignado. I'm offended. I object. I disagree. I'm going to take the square. I'm going to walk to my friend's place and bitch and moan. I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to do something to tell people, to tell anyone, anywhere, that I am not happy. I am being treated like shit. I deserve better. And it is very possible. This whole thing about resources being limited, about the economy is going to shit, I don't care. I know nothing about politics. I don't know who to elect. I don't know how the legislative, executive, and the third one is judicial system. I don't know how this whole system works. And you know what? I don't care. What I care about is that I can live a decent life and I have my basic rights. I'm indignado. Then after that, this is obviously on the revolution in Egypt, the majority of people are at this stage. Some are here, not a small percentage are here, but a lot are here. Then you have the early adopters. The early adopters are like, okay, I'm so indignado, right, that I'm not only am I going to complain and do something, as soon as I see anyone doing anything to complain, to complain about what's going on, I'm going to take part. If there's a demonstration, I'm taking part. If there's a sit-in, I'm taking part. If there's an event, I'm supporting it. If there's a speaker somewhere, I'm going to go and I'm going to talk and ask my questions. If there's, I'm going to do something, and whenever I see something going on, I'm going to do it. And here, January 28th, there was a lot of these people right here. There's a lot of people who were pissed off, and these people were as soon as they saw the chance, they took the streets, right? Then you have the avant-garde, you have the progressive, people who are politically inclined, they're very intellectual, they have vision, they take the first step, they bite the bullet. There's they organize a protest and only 200 go and there are 2,000 policemen and they still do it. And then they come back and they blog about it. And then they talk, well, not necessarily blog, whatever, they talk about it with their friends, whatever. And then they go back and they organize something else. Then they go into prison, then they come out and they still keep going. These are the people who have vision. A lot of these people have the luxury of having vision, have the luxury of having the time to look through, to see how everything's messed up. And they've had contact and experience with the outside world. And then they say, you know what, it's better for everyone if we take down this regime. A lot of the people here are very politically inclined, very intellectual, and a lot of them are from upper middle class and upper class socioeconomic backgrounds because they have the luxury to not worry about where the next meal is coming from, and they have the luxury to think about how can we solve Egypt's problems, and they try to do something about it. And I think these people here are the people who, in Mahalla, in 2008, when it was completely frowned upon to have any sort of assembly, it was completely unaccepted to strike, and they said, you know what, we are going to organize ourselves, and we are going to strike, and we are going to ask for a better life, and we're going to take Mubarak's picture down, and we're going to step on it, because we're cool like that. So that's the avant-garde people. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Ta 10 minuter för frågor om det finns sådana. 10 minutes for questions if there are any.
Anyone have any questions they'd like to ask?
I was wondering how you experienced the kind of revisionism in the media, because instantaneously people have described the revolution as a Facebook revolution, a Twitter revolution, and I saw a documentary like a month ago that was describing the Egyptian revolution as a non-violent, pacifist one. I was watching Al Jazeera. I was seeing the people having large rock fights, and I was wondering how does those narratives affect you?
Western media always tries to romanticize stories and make Hollywood movies out of people dying, you know, and that's what happens. So people talk about the social media, effect of social media. Social media did play a role, but it's a very small role. It's an important role, just like there were a lot of things that played an important role, but it was nowhere. That was not the main thing. The thing is, if you're familiar with Orientalism is very big in the West. It's very big in France and England and US and Scandinavia. It's just the idea of, wow, these people, in the East who come out, belly dancers come out of baskets and snakes to go around their bodies. And it's just very exotic. And so they bring a bunch of young people to come to Malmö and give a talk. And they have like an exotic Egyptian accent, and they talk about, wow, I was on Facebook, and then I did this, and I did that, and it was awesome. But that's not how it is. I think it's because the West were following the Egyptian revolution via Facebook and Twitter. All of the Twitter activists were on the ground every day, and we were all updating on what's going on. And main like CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, Al Arabiya, they all quoted tweets. This was the first time that tweets were used as a quote. And so they were getting their news from us. We were on the ground where no one would go, and we would say what's going on. And this was the tool we had, and technology is beautiful like that. And social media is very powerful like that. So none of us like the fact that it's oversimplified like that. And that's why the other day they had a conference in Stockholm, and Gharbiya, a friend, a comrade, if you will, was saying we didn't use social media in Tahrir. The tools that were very useful were stones and sticks, and that's what we use, and it's very true. As for what you were saying, the other part about not being a peaceful revolution, they still sell this stuff to Egyptians. I mean, Egypt, a lot of Egyptians believe that once this is not peaceful, then it's bad. Because if it's not peaceful, it's Libya or Syria, and we don't want that. But that's not how it is. In any capitalist society, if you try to ask for your rights, what would happen is the first thing they'll do is they try to negotiate. And then when negotiation fails, because they still want you to keep getting 400 coronas a month and not having a contract, and you go on strike, then they try to see how long they can last without you. Then when they realize that you are too powerful for them, they bring the police. And that's how it is. All of these countries, okay, have a police system that is very, not trained, but very prepared to deal with anyone who is asking for social justice. Because if that happens, and if Mahalla succeeded, it succeeded in a few things. It obviously led to the revolution. But if Mahalla had immediately succeeded, all of the factories all over Egypt would have gone like ballistic. They would have gone crazy asking for their rights. And you don't want that to happen. So you send the Secret Service and the police, you throw people in jail, you torture some people, and you scare others, and then you try to pay to leaders of the unions and what have you. So when that happens, you have to protect yourself. And by protecting yourself, it's going to get violent. Because if it doesn't get violent, if you can beat the police without getting violent, it's impossible. But if you can, they're going to bring in the army. And good luck with the army, you know? And so what happens is, and I've talked this is any country, by the way, not just Egypt. What you'd have to do is you'd have to use the minimum violence that you need to be able to get past this stage. So you're keeping it as peaceful as possible, but it's not peaceful. It's getting a little violent. We're burning down buildings, and people are talking about a peaceful revolution. It's ridiculous.
I wanted to ask one question.
You're from Greece, right?
Yeah.
Well, applause for Greece. You're an inspiration. You're an inspiration to us. Us burning police stations, that's nothing compared to what the Greeks do.
The problem in Greece is that the more pathetic pessimist in Greece is from the left parties. We have this problem with the civil war. The left parties are so afraid of that they're going to be like that they are not following the law, that they're gonna be said that they are provocateurs and all of this. We have a long-term problem. But I wanted, because I had some information from an activist, but it was only through Skype from Egypt, about the cohesion.
Who is it, do you know?
I don't remember. He was really well known in the West social media.
I'm sure I know. But
Yeah, for sure, but I don't remember the name. It was a small talk. And about the social cohesion in terms of, first of confrontation, either with the police, and also in terms of striking, because he was showing some examples like the Egyptian people really are struggling to make ends meet, and he was showing some examples that when there was a strike or a demonstration in the streets, that some people, because in some families have to struggle in order to make ends meet, they can't go on strike, and some parts of the family, some members of the family were going to work, and others were were going on strike, and they were demonstrating, and there were shifts in order, because the families had like an income. This is really mandatory in Egypt. How you find this cohesion, and also he was showing great examples about trying to confuse the police through the social media. They were giving like fake appointments, and the police was confused. All these small techniques that in the end helped, and the connection with the neighborhood, because this is a problem we have in Greece. Although sometimes we are really good, well armed, in the end, because it's a gut chamber, the whole city, when we are backing off in the neighborhoods, we are not prepared to hold there.
a lot of things to say. You said it.
Yeah, about social cohesion in terms of strike, how you deal this when there is problem in having a meal for the family. About social media, how it helped and confused the police.
No, you put it very nicely, actually. In the Mahalla protests, when the women started the sit-in, and they had the sit-in, their husbands would go and make food and bring them food and take care of the house, and they would work while their wives are on strike. I think, and I truly believe this, that when you deal with the class struggle, you are dealing with all of the problems that come as byproducts. And with that, there's feminism, sexism, and all these things, because you realize that if we all want to live a decent life, decent lives, and be able to survive and live properly, we need to forget about all of our differences, because this is just backwards. That's not the way forward. So what this means is, what I'm trying to say is that we end up finding means to an end. Personally, I'm not a factory worker to tell you my experience and that sort of thing, but from what I've seen and from what I can tell, there's always ways to figure out so that the strike can keep going, so that we have a better chance of meeting our demands, and at the same time, so we have some sort of income to get us living, even if it's the women on strike, or if it's the men, whatever it is, it's just the rest of the family work for it. And I think that's natural. I think that makes sense. That would happen anywhere in the world. You want to survive, and you realize that your well-being depends on everyone in your community, and that's why you work together. As for social media and the strikes, does not have any. There's very little relation. Most of the factory workers and company workers and what have you are from lower socioeconomic backgrounds or lower middle class, and they do not have. A lot of them don't have access to internet. If they do, they might be on Facebook, but that's as far as it goes. Like none of this Twitter. The YouTube is very big, and so people get to see videos on YouTube without knowing what YouTube is, because people download these videos and then they send it via Bluetooth, and then you gather around in a cafe, and someone will show you the video on his mobile, and his mobile goes around, and so videos are effective. But other than that, the best way to kind of create agitation and kind of get the people to mobilize is to show them videos of people who are in their situation, who have gone through strikes, and therefore their lives have improved because they've gotten some of their demands. And I think that's how it works. So not social media, but communication. Maybe digital communication if it's via mobiles and SMS, MMS, and Bluetooth, but not social media because they're not online.
Yeah, go ahead. If you one last
Vi tar
question.
en till fråga, så måste vi ta lugnt.
One last question and then lunch.
Short is when the communications broke down, as I understood, this helped in a way because it showed that the regime freaked out. But what was the first reactions of the public, like the people?
I don't know. I can tell you about the reaction of the people I was with. I didn't see the reaction of anyone else. But no, we were freaking out. There's any sort of censorship on internet in Egypt. Not because Hosni Barak loves us, but because they don't know what the internet's like and they don't know how it works. So they never bothered to do any sort of censorship. So the fact that on the 25th, Bamboozer, which is Swedish by the way, good job on Bamboozer, was blocked. We had to use Kik, which is the same service, it's fine. Facebook and Twitter were blocked, so we came up with proxies and VPNs, but this was the first time it happened. So the reaction was, okay, good news, they're freaking out, let's try to organize ourselves. For the first time ever, Egyptians were on time, because we had no way to communicate and let people know that you're arriving late. And so we were only like 10 to 15 minutes late, which is like a record breaker. So we, so we figured out somehow.
Can I just ask one follow-up?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, because what I heard is that when they shut down the internet, that people were able to organize that Friday in their neighborhoods and in their mosques, and that they would, that people were organizing their marches to go down to the square on a neighborhood basis and on the basis of kind of personal relationships with neighbors. And I thought about this from the perspective of living in the U.S. I thought, well, if they shut down the internet here, there'd be no capacity for us to organize on a neighborhood basis because we don't know our neighbors. Because I live far apart from all my friends. I have no personal connection, and so it seemed that in Egypt people were drawing on a kind of a personal connection that they had to their neighbors to organize at this very sort of basic level, whether it's the mosque or just on the street, and then to go down to Tahrir, and then using Twitter and Facebook or whatever when that was useful. But it seemed like that was really important, also having that connection with other people, that you knew as your neighbors or people you worked with or whatnot, and that can't be underestimated. We can't do without that.
Exactly. You know, the communities throughout all of Egypt, that really helps a lot, especially in the cities where people have awareness levels and contact and experience, but at the same time they still have the communities. Because, you know, if you go, there are parts of Cairo where people don't know their neighbors, you know, but they're at the same time, in the majority of Cairo, people are very aware of their area and their neighborhoods, and police don't know how to manage things inside neighborhoods. And that's why what they did, on the 25th of January, all the marches were organized so that people would come out of the neighborhoods already large in size, so that they couldn't stop you, because they couldn't go inside because they're all like narrow streets that are arbitrary. Now the thing is, we used to use mosques, and you have these 5 or 6 big mosques all around Cairo, and they're the meeting points. Whenever there's a protest, you know that you go there. At the Friday prayer, as soon as it's done, chanting starts, and we march towards Tahrir. And that's what happened on Friday. We said, okay, we'll start at that mosque nearby. So we met at the square right in front of my house. My friends and I, a couple of people, were like 12 or 15 people, walked over 5 minutes, we were at the mosque, waited for people to finish praying because no one was praying. And then when the prayer ended, chants started, and we started moving. And that set the precedent of, like, you guys know, if there's no communication, Friday, right after prayer, at the big mosque in your neighborhood, there are going to be people there. Just look out for just people who look revolutionary, because sometimes you have like insurgents. Sometimes you have, policemen and stuff in plain clothes. But then you look out for those, and then you start marching. So yeah, you're right on that. Community playing a part. So is that it?
Yes.
Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.